I am so conservative.
Rationalize in my head. These are things I read.
And I'm going to talk about Willow Creek.
Okay.
Willow Creek, a few years back, had invited.
Remembered at the time when Will Rogers said, I don't belong to any organized religion. I'm a Baptist.
Yeah. I am so conservative. If you didn't jump to conclusions, you might not get any exercise. I am so conservative. I am so conservative.
And welcome to the Unknown Webcast. Practicing social distancing isn't really difficult for me since, as you know, I am so conservative I can't turn left even when I'm driving. Therefore, those who need safe space from having their ideas challenged naturally maintain a social distance from me. For those who are new to this webcast, this is a trigger warning. This is not a safe space if you are easily offended by having your ideas challenged or maybe even by our satire. Today is March 24, 2020, and this is broadcast number 182. Joining us this week is our friend Montise Peterson, who to kick around the question, is Christianity a white man's religion? My name is Don Vino, and I'm president of Midwest Christian Outreach, Inc. in Wonder Lake, Illinois, which produces the Unknown Webcast, and our senior researcher and co-host is Ron Hensel, who will introduce the sponsors of today's webcast. And here is Ronnie Baby.
Greetings from sunny Florida, where the palm tree came out, made sure to keep 6 feet of distance from the other palm trees. He saw his shadow, and now there are going to be 12 more months of summer. Our sponsors for this week's webcast include the Designer Jesus Collection. No longer need your church's Jesus be a source of social embarrassment. Check out the new Jesuses at the Designer Jesus Collection, and the Heresy Conservation Board, ensuring sustainable errors for the 21st century and beyond. The Heresy Conservation Board. And if you like this webcast, or if it really annoys you and you'd like to inflict it on someone else to ensure your continued access to this program, please go to midwestoutreach.org and click the yellow donate button to contribute as you feel led. And don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube. Well, welcome, Montise.
Hello.
Welcome back.
How you guys doing?
Pretty good.
I'm fat and good looking.
Oh, boy.
That's yeah. He's
On occasion, I walk up into a place and they look at me and they go, hi, and I tell them I'm not really not. I just appear that way to onlookers.
Oh boy. You need to take your show on the road.
Yeah. Well, that would require to forsake my physical distancing, if I did that. So.
Okay.
Oh, and yeah.
My stomach is big enough to keep 6 feet of distance between me and the next person. So.
You know what? Someone told me to watch my waistline, so I worked hard at getting it out where I can see it easily.
Okay, I think Montise has had quite enough.
You guys are funny.
Yes.
But looks on everything. Yeah, that's an old one. Okay, so
Montise, we've had you on before, and
yes.
And you have braved it out to try again in spite of past experience.
Yes.
So
yeah, it was pretty rough the last time.
Yeah.
He keeps he's a masochist. Okay.
Well, the after effects actually on the last one were pretty interesting. There was a lot of interaction on the comments after the webcast was over.
Really?
And I expect we may have a similar kind of a thing here because the ethnic issues tend to bring out people's emotional weaponry, let's say. And Penjamin, by the way, says he's grumpy today. So
okay, we'll find out.
Yeah.
Okay. I remember. Maybe this will serve as a good way to begin. I don't know. Maybe it'll be a bad way, but when I was a very, very, very young man, I was about 18, 19.
Mhm.
When an elder friend, a friend at my church, he was one of our elders, and he was very instrumental in bringing me to the Lord. And every week he helped the chaplains at Cook County Jail in Chicago by helping with their weekly Bible studies with the inmates. And he invited me to go down with him. I think I was in my senior year in high school, and um, I kept doing that for the following year after I went to Bible college, because the Bible college was nearby, and they also had a ministry that participated in the ministry with volunteer students. And I became a volunteer because I was already familiar with it. And one of the things that I learned was that the Black Muslims, the Nation of Islam, were very active in Cook County Jail, and they sent their representatives into the Bible study. So they had their own separate meeting where they had, they were learning, their own teachings. And on top of that, they would send emissaries in. Basically, well, there are some pretty strict rules in the Bible study, but they did their best to disrupt. They did their best to ask questions they didn't want to upset the other inmates, because they realized a lot of the other inmates were Christians and very serious about their faith. So they knew they kind of felt where the boundaries were, how far could they go, right? But they would try to ask difficult questions. And every once in a while you would hear this from them. This is like 1977, 1978. They're saying, well, Christianity is the white man's religion, And of course that would sometimes start a little bit of an argument between the inmates. So my experience goes back about 40 years, not consistent experience, but some experience. And they were saying it then. And you'd occasionally hear a Nation of Islam street preacher on the streets of Chicago saying the same thing as we walk to and from work. You could hear them. So that's where I thought I'd start. Comments, observations?
No, I mean, you're absolutely right. This is something, of course, me being African American, I've heard my entire life.
Really?
This is something I've heard in barbershops, among family, among different social gatherings when a religion would come up. Here in Detroit, of course, we have Nation of Islam. I've had lots of discussions with them, with people who practice a Moorish philosophy and Moorish doctrine.
Oh.
I've heard it from them, and I know a lot of people involved with that as well. Not to mention the Hebrew Israelite crowd, Black liberation theology crowd. I've had opportunity to talk with all kinds of people. I have a friend of mine who is an Ifa priest, and
what priest?
Ifa.
Ifa.
Ifa. IFA. It's a ancient African religion, and but most of it is based on the rejection of Christianity because of cultural reasons, and that's something I did want to discuss today.
Yeah, let's go for it.
Are you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Ready to jump in? Okay.
Yeah, you got a slideshow. I want to see it.
Well,
okay.
we do. I just, before we do this, I want to put something out here that we'll respond to as we go on.
Okay.
That came in on my LinkedIn, and it's a question that says this. It's from Abane Paul. I'm not even sure how to say this. Swigye, Twessigye. If I say that wrong, I apologize.
Apologies. Yeah.
And he writes, to an extent, it is, saying that Christianity is the white man's religion, for it doesn't fully follow the Torah, though lots of academic arguments meant to make it more human-suiting than God-suiting. The New Testament is Greek, not Hebrew or Aramaic, is one of my biggest questions, yet most of the writers were Hebrews. Many times in higher learning institutions here in Uganda, I am reminded of the fact that the Bible could have been here in Africa, but not Christianity. I also need direction on those concerns. So we have a wide range of subjects. Were there blacks in the Bible? And Montise is going to deal with that.
Yes.
What influence did the African church, if they were blacks in early Christianity, have on the church? Those are really important questions to deal with. So with that, we're going to kind of let you guide our pathway through the discussion here, and Ron and I will interrupt whenever we just feel like it.
Okay. Okay. Fine.
You know, just randomly. No. Go ahead.
Okay, so I'm ready to get started. So on the onset, let me say this. As believers, as Christians, we know that the Bible, the invitation for salvation is all encompassing. It has nothing to do with ethnicity or race at all. I want to say that on right in the onset here, guys, that we see things like whosoever believes, as many as received, if any man. So Christianity is about our faith in Jesus Christ, and it does not have anything to do with ethnicity. I want to make sure we're clear about that. However, what I've often found is this, doing apologetics, and I'm sure you guys will agree, you will find certain oppositions to Christianity. Among them, there may be what I would consider to be intellectual oppositions. So that may be those who are atheists and they believe that science provides answers for things such as existence of man in the world. You will have theological disagreements. Those who don't believe that a man could have walked on water, or that he was born of a virgin, or things of that nature. You have some people who reject it historically. Maybe they don't believe that the Bible is what we claim it to be, and there were other things that existed before the Bible. Then there's what I consider a kind of unique rejection of Christianity, and that is the cultural rejection. In other words, we have certain groups, certain societies or ethnic groups that feel that Christianity does not fit into their culture, and that following Christianity or becoming a Christian is a betrayal of their culture and a betrayal of their ancestry, and what word can I use here? Good word here. I guess ancestry is a good word, but their ancestry, their culture, that heritage. Christianity, I'm sorry?
Heritage.
Their heritage is a good word, but Christianity does not fit into that for them. And it's a betrayal of their heritage, a betrayal of their ancestors and their culture to become a Christian. So, for example, we see this within the Atlantic slave trade, transatlantic slave trade, where Christianity was absolutely forced on African people by slave owners. And that's a historical fact. So many people look to that and they say, well, wait a minute. If I take on the religion that was used to enslave and oppress my ancestors, it is almost a betrayal of their ancestors to take on the religion of the oppressor. So many of them completely reject Christianity for that reason. An interesting story. I recently watched a video of a young girl, African-American girl, and she was a missionary. Her church had trained her and a whole group of people, and they went to Haiti. In this group, she was the only African-American a part of the ministry team. So she told an interesting story. She said she was sharing the gospel with an old Haitian man who sat on the side of the road. And she said that she used the book that they had given them. It was like a picture book that they would use to show the gospel and teach the gospel. So she said this older man, he sat and he listened intently to everything she said. And when she was done, he said to her, excuse me, he said to her, I understood your story, but why is Jesus white?
Mm-hmm.
And she said, he's not. And he responded, then why have you drawn him white?
Mm.
The young missionary at the time, she said she had no response, but she then began to understand and do more research herself and began to see how through history, biblical characters have been portrayed more European than their natural heritage or natural regional appearance. So this became an issue for her, and she began to study this more. And I would say this, again, this is the main reason we see a lot of people rejecting Christianity.
Right. So I might interject here then, if I can interrupt your thought, that what they are rejecting, and we find this in many groups, is not biblical Christianity, but a cultural misrepresentation of Christianity,
Absolutely.
right? So,
Absolutely.
so it's helpful then if we can help them to understand that what they're rejecting is something we would reject as well. I mean, as I talk with someone and they tell me they reject God, and I have them describe to me the God they're rejecting, most often I reject that God as well, because it's a false view of who God is.
Well, no, absolutely. That's absolutely true. And the thing that I'm hoping I'm gonna show today is something that I think has become the problem here. And I'm gonna get into that in a moment. But I do want to say this, that we have to remember to look past the transatlantic slave trade, which is about, what, 400 years old. Christianity predates that by hundreds of years. So Christianity existed before any of that ever happened. And I think most people who view Christianity as a white man's religion, they tend not to go beyond the slave trade. So today, I'm hoping to do that. So first of all, let's get into it. I'm sorry, go ahead.
You've heard my stock response to that. For most people, history started 18 minutes ago. I mean, most of culture is illiterate on any historical questions, especially those of the church, and that's as true of those inside the church as outside the church. If I ask the question, "Who's this behind me in that picture frame?" most people would have no idea. They might even look and go, I think he's an Arab, maybe. That's one of the ante-Nicene fathers. In fact, the one who really was instrumental in formulating the doctrine of the Trinity, Tertullian. So
that's right. No, that's absolutely correct. There's a lack of understanding of biblical history, church history, and just history in general, to be honest, which kind of leads to these problems. So first, let me state this. The Bible was written on 3 continents: Africa, Asia Minor, and Europe. Okay, but when we're speaking of Europe, we're speaking near Rome and that area, because obviously during this time, England and these places did not exist at that time. Okay, so we're talking about mostly Rome and down in that area. And so we're going to start here. Can you screen share me now? What's the other page here? My slide.
There you go.
Thank you, sir. So what I have here, and I'm going to, this is approximately where they believe that the Garden of Eden was. And the area that they believe it was in is primarily near Mesopotamia or modern day Iraq. When we look in the Bible, the way it describes it, it talks about how the rivers wind through the entire land of Cush. And Cush, we know, is the son of Ham, and the African part of the African race comes from Cush. Cush today would be, we're at the time the Nubians, and then today Sudan. So that is an African region completely. If we ever seen any depiction of Nubia, they are very dark-skinned people. So this is where these waters ran through. And if you see on the picture here, this is where most historians, archaeologists believe that the Garden of Eden existed. So it was not in Europe, okay? It was in the Middle East near Africa, just to be clear. Okay, when we can see this in Genesis 2:8-14. Okay, the next thing I want to bring out here is we see here Hagar, who was an Egyptian handmaiden of Sarah. In Genesis 21:9, it says, but Sarah saw Ishmael, the son of Abraham, and her Egyptian servant Hagar, making fun of her son Isaac. So this is the woman Hagar that Abraham had a child with, the child Ishmael, and she was an Egyptian woman. So again, I want to make sure we're clear. Some of these characters in the Bible, a lot of their lineage and their heritage here, ethnicity. The next one is Zipporah. She was a Cushite, and she was the wife of Moses. And we see this in Numbers 21:1. Miriam and Aaron spoke against Moses because of the Cushite woman whom he had married, for he married a Cushite woman. So Cush, again, as we've already said, they were dark-skinned people, very dark-skinned. And in these ancient maps, it's kind of interesting because you'll see where Nubia was right up against Ethiopia, which on the other side was Egypt. And it was through this region that we had a very dark-skinned race of people who were becoming Christians, as we will begin to see. But here, already we're seeing dark-skinned people, African people, right from the beginning in the Bible, the Garden of Eden as well. Okay, the next thing, excuse me one second as I do a Marco Rubio here. And let's grab some water.
I didn't know I was doing Marco Rubio's all this time. Just
Right. Okay, so the next thing I want to talk about here is Simon the Cyrene. And I think this is very interesting here. So Simon the Cyrene was the man who was compelled by the Romans to carry the cross of Jesus of Nazareth. As Jesus was taking his crucifix, according to Synoptic Gospel, and we're going to read this from Mark 15:21. It says, and as they came out, they found a man of Cyrene, Simon by name, and him they compelled to bear his cross. So Simon the Cyrene is the one who helped Jesus. What a lot of people don't know, Cyrene was in Northeast Africa, which today will be Libya. So when we see here depicted in these images that he was a dark-skinned man from Northeast Africa. He was the one who helped carry Jesus's cross. So again, what we're seeing, Africans all throughout the Bible, right in front of our eyes. And I think sometimes part of the problem is we don't stop to do a little bit of research. When we see the man of Cyrene, Simon, most people would never look up the word Cyrene to see what that even means or where that's from. So that's Northeast Africa.
now, my understanding is that at that time, the dominant ethnic groups extending clear across North Africa were the Berber peoples. And they were fairly dark-skinned. In fact, pretty dark in times. There was a variety, but yeah, they would have been noticeably different from the typical Middle Eastern complexion. Yeah, that's my understanding. So
no, that's correct, and I think that is my point here. For those who make the argument that Christianity is a white man's religion, the very man who helped carry Jesus' cross was African.
Yes, North African, but dark-skinned.
Yes. So he was not French, he was not German, he was not English. Okay, he was Northeast African man. So I want to make sure we're clear about that. Okay, next I want to talk about the day of Pentecost in the book of Acts. And I always find this interesting because when Luke wrote Acts, it was an interesting thing to me. Why did he take the time to name all the people that were there? So I'm going to read this really quick. When they heard this sound, a crowd came together in bewilderment because each one heard their own language being spoken. Utterly amazed, they asked, aren't all these who are speaking Galileans? Then how is it that each of them that each of us hears them in our native language? Parthians, Medes, Elamites, residents of Mesopotamia, Judea, Cappadocia, Pontus in Asia, Phrygia. Where am I at? I didn't wear my glasses today, guys. Pamphylia, Egypt, and the parts of Libya near Cyrene. Visitors from Rome, both Jews and converts to Judaism, Cretans and Arabs. So when we look at all these people named here, among these people, we see Africans, we see Egyptians, we see people from Cyrene, we see the Medes who are from, today would be Iraq near Tehran, but they were also dark-skinned people, Elamites. So when we see here, and I point this out to people, again, to reiterate this, what we do not see here are English people, Scottish people, German people, French people. So when we say, well, Christianity is a white man's religion, my challenge is, where in the foundation of the church, where in the Old Testament, where do we see
Right.
Anything other than Middle Eastern people, African people, well, we do have the Romans, but they're the bad guys in the story.
It takes about a couple hundred years after Pentecost before you begin to hear about people from Northern Europe and the British Isles.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Becoming Christians.
Right. Now,
Absolutely right.
here's kind of an interesting side note. As you read through the Pentecost account there, it named 12 language groups. There are 12 tribes in the nation of Israel. You have 12 apostles sitting on 12 thrones, and it's all Jews or converts to Judaism. Jews or converts to Judaism, which is trans-ethnic in a sense. So Judaism,
yes, sir, that's correct.
Encompasses quite a large body of world ethnicities that are Jewish by descent.
Yes, absolutely correct. Absolutely.
Carry on. That's my 2 cents worth. And oh, by the way,
okay.
we do need to
Yes.
hear, because we're going to just get to talk about who Jesus is again. And you told your story that Jesus was white, and why is Jesus white? And in part, that's because we have a sort of a designer Jesus mentality.
Yeah, we do. And you know, one of our sponsors, in fact, specializes in that and asks everybody today, do you cringe when the Christians you hang out with try to introduce Jesus to your non-Christian friends? Well, you can say goodbye to the days when your church's Jesus was a source of social embarrassment. Now, even your church can keep pace with the latest fashion-forward trends in spirituality. Introducing the Designer Jesus Collection. These amazing new Jesus styles are hitting church runways and the most exclusive Jesus fashion shows at churches near you. You don't want to miss. I think we're going to turn off Montise's microphone there. Okay, I think that's where we're getting it from. Okay, you don't want to miss. Okay, you don't really want to miss Yoga Jesus, Hipster Jesus, Buddy Jesus, Socialist Jesus, Mormon Jesus, and of course, Muslim Jesus. At Designer Jesus Collection fashion shows, you will find a Jesus you'll be proud to introduce to your most sophisticated, cutting-edge friends and acquaintances. Please observe the attendance requirements. Cost of admission, your eternal soul. Required attire, semi-formal. All proceeds benefit His Royal Majesty of the Kingdom of Darkness. The Designer Jesus Collection, London, Paris, Rome, New York, Salt Lake City, and a church near you. So we're getting a little feedback because as I became more and more excited, I started. Okay, I'm trying to turn my
No, I fixed it.
Oh, good. Okay. Thank you.
That was something I did on my end. It's fixed now. Don't worry.
Gotcha. All right. Well, back to you, both of you, or Montise, or whoever's next.
Okay, we're ready.
We're ready.
Okay, I'm ready to go. So this is my picture of Pentecost we had there. So these were some of the images that I had of Elamite goddess, ancient Medes, Mesopotamians, and the CYRENEs. So again, as we already stated, we know that they were darker skinned people. And this is who was living in that region at the time. Okay, so let's look at Acts 13, 1 through 3. I'm going to read that. Now in the church of Antioch, there were prophets and teachers, Barnabas, Simon, and Niger, Lucius of Cyrene, and Manaen, who had been brought up with Herod the Tetrarch and Saul. While they were worshiping the Lord and fasting, the Holy Spirit said, "Set apart for me Barnabas and Saul for the work to which I have called them." So after they had fasted and prayed, they placed hands on them and sent them off. Now, I like to use this verse because among the people who laid hands on them was Lucius the Cyrene, again, a Northeast African man here, who was a part of the group that laid hands on Paul. So again, I'm going to reiterate this several times. We see again where an African was involved and from the very beginning, helping carrying Jesus' cross, the day of Pentecost, and here now laying hands on Paul. So they're all throughout Scripture. And I think, again, when we don't do a little bit of research here, this goes right over our heads, and we don't realize how influential they were in Scripture. The next, of course, is in Acts 8:26-40, which I'm not going to read the whole thing, but it is the account of Philip and the Ethiopian eunuch. So the Ethiopian eunuch, we know, was from Ethiopia. So he was African, and he received Christ by way of Philip. So again, we see throughout the Bible, Africans are playing a pivotal role in what was happening in the early part of the Christian church, the first century here. And these are just some depictions that I have that I found through some various sources, but we see how he is depicted every time as an African man, every time.
Right. And it is most likely, I would suggest, it is most likely he was a convert to Judaism. And so he's legitimately Jewish, even though he descends from a different ethnic group.
Yes, and we know this because I'll read the story. He was returning from the festival, I believe. So we know that's probably historically true. Yes.
Right. Okay.
So, to continue, and this is one of my favorite characters, and that is Athanasius. Okay. Athanasius the Great, as he was called. So when Christianity arrived in North Africa in the 1st or 2nd century AD, the Christian communities in North Africa were among the earliest in the world. Okay. And one of them, Athanasius the Great, he was from Alexandria. He was a bishop from Alexandria. So what we do know is that what historians believe, I should say, that it was Mark, one of the 4 evangelists, who in around 60 AD was what historians believe, that he's the one who took Christianity from Jerusalem to Alexandria through Egypt there. And it's believed that it was Mark who first did that. And it was at this time, sometimes later, that we run across Saint Athanasius the Great, Archbishop of Alexandria. He's one of the early church fathers. He is fought early heresies in the church, such as Arianism, which is really a core belief of Jehovah's Witnesses, that Jesus Christ is not God, he's a created being. And it was Athanasius who helped fight these heresies in the early church. And another historical fact about Athanasius and his famous, what they call Easter letter, he kind of had a running list of the New Testament books before it was actually canonized. So he had a running list of these New Testament books again before it was canonized. So Athanasius played a pivotal role in shaping the foundation of the church from the very beginning, the very beginning. So this is one of the men I look to historically is Athanasius.
You know,
so any questions about Athanasius?
Well, not about him, but so far as I'm getting a picture, the picture you're laying out here, there weren't a lot of white guys back then in the church. I mean, as time went on, maybe by Athanasius's time, you had some, a few, maybe. I mean, you had, as I understand it, also you had these barbarian the barbarians were the white people. Okay.
Right. Well, right. I want to get to that in a moment, but yes, that's right.
And my understanding is that you just mentioned Arius and his heresy. The first form of Christianity that the barbarians, they would be the Goths. You know, when I think of Goths today, I think of teenagers who, you know, color their hair black, you know, but these were people who, this was their ethnic heritage. You had the Ostrogoths in the east, the Visigoths in the west. Those are later terms. You had the Vandals, and these were all Germanic tribes. They were white. And the first version of Christianity that they adopt was Arianism. You know, they became, the first thing they became wasn't real Christians. They became heretics first. And then after they conquered western part, they wanted to fit in with the church that was already there, and so they eventually converted to Trinitarian Christianity. But they were latecomers. They were relatively latecomers, and they were still pretty much a minority. The whites were a minority in the church for several hundred years, and then really, when you get right down to it, after that, they were only a majority in Western Europe, Eastern Europe, the Mediterranean area. You had Berber Christians. You had Middle Eastern Christians. You had olive skins, brown skins, and even darker skins as the church kept going south. So whites were a minority, and what we're seeing today is pretty recent. So, okay, that's my 2 cents.
Well, I have a
that's
nickel.
Absolutely right, and some of that I am going to address in a moment. So we got another Marco Rubio going on there, huh?
Yeah, I got my Marco here.
Right. So I did want to say real quick, is I looking at some of the comments, and I'm not sure. I see someone saying that Jesus is not white. I don't remember us ever saying that Jesus was white. I don't remember that ever happening. So I'm not sure why that comment is made, and a reference to Revelations 1:14, which has nothing to do with ethnicity at all. Has nothing. We addressed that in our last video. So if the person wants to, I'm sorry.
He's saying the white peoples are called Edomites. No, that's not even true.
Well, like I said, we addressed that with Black Hebrew Israelites. So if they want to refer to that video on YouTube, it's there. Why I did address Revelations 1:14. So I'm not going to do that here, but I did a pretty thorough job there. So if they want to look there, they can. Okay, the next thing I want to go into here, and this is actually when I first learned about this. Oh my God, I was so excited about learning about this. And man, and that is the kingdom of Aksum. Okay.
Oh, yeah. Go ahead.
I'm sorry.
AKSUM is how I understand it's spelled, right?
And it's also been spelled AXUM as well. So I've seen both spellings, but that's correct. So I love the story about this kingdom. And here's why. I'm going to read this a little bit from my notes, so because I don't want to miss anything. As Christianity spread across Northeast Africa in the 4th century, it reached into an extremely powerful kingdom called Aksum, what is now a part of Ethiopia. They were a very powerful nation. They did a lot of trade, primarily around the route of the Red Sea, and they were ruled by a king named Izana, and he converted to Christianity. Some believe around 327 CE, around in that time, and he became one of the first rulers in the world to make Christianity the official religion of his kingdom. Now, I think this is so important here. King Izana was the first king to make his entire kingdom a Christian nation. So this predates pretty much any other nation becoming a Christian nation, and it was King Izana in Aksum. They embraced Christianity in the region. Let me see. And today, let me see here. I'm going to pull this up. So if we can see that slide I just put up. Can we put that slide up, guys?
Hey, Don, can you get the slide up? Can you hear us? He's got the control there. Go ahead.
There we go. Okay. So here are some depictions of King Izana, and we see the statue here of him on the left side of the screen. It should be, and this is him. He was a king, and I love the story of the Aksumites here. Let me see here. So in the 7th century, Christianity retreated in Ethiopia and in Africa as it was spreading, and it was at the hands of Islam. When Islam came around the 7th century, they were killing the Christians and forcing them to become Islamic at the time, become Muslim at the time. So you had kingdoms like the Nubians who were there, and they fought against Islam. And then you had Egypt there, and then we had, again, Ethiopia, and we have the Aksumites here. So they were the dominant religion in Northeast Africa there was Christianity. And again, we're talking about 4th century, the 7th century when Islam came. So this predates, for everyone who want to be clear, this predates this transatlantic slave trade by many, many, many hundreds of years. So here we are with the Oxumites. One other reason this is my favorite story is because they have many Christian landmarks that are still standing today. As we can see this church that they carved out of a rock, and it's still there to this day.
Yeah, amazing.
This is an amazing church.
Whoa, dude, look at that.
I just want to take a moment to just really soak this in here. It's still there. They go worship there today. And this church exists in Ethiopia.
And look at the top. From the top, it looks like a cross.
It is, exactly. Exactly.
That is a stupendous. I don't know how we would do that today.
I don't know either, but this is amazing. This is an amazing place.
That was carved out of one rock?
I'm sorry?
That was carved out of a single rock?
Yeah, well, they carved, you can see how the images, they carved it into the ground, and they built it or carved it out from this area in the ground that you can see, this gigantic rock mass.
Wow. That
they kind of carved around if you really look at the picture.
Oh, man, I'm going to look that up. That is amazing. Holy
yeah, it's just, yeah, so, and this is what's interesting, and this goes back to what you were saying earlier. So while a lot of this was taking place, most of Europe, Germany, England, they were still involved in pagan worship.
Yep.
At the time. They were believing in Odin, and he was the oldest god, and dragons and fairies and elves. And you can see this depicted in many of the most of the art and literature of that time. And you even see it depicted in movies today. They were not Christians. It wasn't until around the 7th century that I believe England was exposed to Christianity.
Well, actually, you had two things happen. First of all, there was an initial evangelism of the British Isles when everybody was still Celtic or Celtic, and then there is a Germanic invasion of pagan Germans, the Anglo-Saxons, and they pushed Christianity back and reintroduced paganism to what's now England, and they had to be re-evangelized, 100 years later. But even then, you talk about the pace of evangelism in Europe. There were still pagan tribes in the area of Lithuania in about 1400. In the they had not finished evangelizing Europe for a good 14 centuries. It took a long time. Yeah. 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 So
I know this, and that's absolutely correct. And I think the interesting thing about a lot of this is people like to go to Rome and Constantine and the Nicene Council. A lot of this stuff was happening before that or around the same time as that without any influence of Rome. So the Romans had not had any influence on any of this yet. And what I'm showing here in this screen here is we see it's called the Chapel of the Tablet. So in their tradition here in Ethiopia, they believe that the tablets, the 10 Commandments, are being housed in this church. Now, of course, I don't believe that. This is more their tradition. Yeah. If it was really there, that place would have been pillaged and ransacked by now. Let's just be clear. Yeah. I'm sure it would have. But they actually have guards that stand there and watch this church they say to guard the tablets. So, but this is how steep their tradition and history is with the Bible. And again, this predates a lot of things that were happening in Europe. You can't
deny looking at this that there is a very deep and ancient connection, and it's pervasive in their culture. It connects. They have a Christian culture that's far more ancient than that of Europe or the United States.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I think here's the Council of Nicaea, but this happened after this. And I find this interesting that a lot of this history is lost, that Christianity, again, is not a white man's religion. So now let's get to the all-important question here, guys, okay? And that important question is this. Why did this happen, and how did it happen that we have today Christianity is being looked at as a white man's religion? And I would say this is the reason why. You have two different things here at work. We have conversion versus colonization. So once Constantine became a Christian and you started to have the establishment of the Roman Church, they started depicting images and symbolism to match their culture, which is why we see Jesus depicted as a European. We see a lot of the disciples depicted as European, their hair, their eyes, and the gospel then began to look like Europe. So when this happened, they now became, as Europe became the dominant culture, and they began to colonize other cultures, they took their brand of Christianity and they imposed that on other cultures.
Well, you know, I would also like to say, have you ever heard the song "Some Children See Him"? It's kind of a Christmas song.
No.
It's called. The lyrics go, "Some children see him lily white, the baby Jesus born that night. Some children see him lily white with tresses soft and fair. Some children see him bronzed and brown, the Lord of heaven to earth come down. Some children see him bronzed and brown with dark and heavy hair." It's a really nice, sweet song because it's saying that children will visualize Jesus in accordance with what they see, you know. And for a long time, most Europeans had little or no contact with people outside of Europe. So what did Middle Easterners look like? What did Israelites look like? Okay, they saw some Jews. They might have had a synagogue nearby, but guess what? By this time, it's 1,000 years later, and a lot of those Jews have intermarried to a degree with the European surrounding, and they were looking a lot more white in Europe than they would have said the North African Jews or the Middle Eastern Jews. So they painted what they knew, and I've also seen paintings of nativity scenes from the Far East where Jesus, Mary, and Joseph are depicted as if they were Chinese. So to some of it, I don't think in the beginning, at least, I don't think it was deliberate. I think as time went on, it became so culturally ingrained that people just didn't think about it, and it's kind of a form of thoughtlessness. You know, they should have thought about it.
Well, and I would say that to a degree, I'll disagree with you to a degree. Okay. I think at some point it was deliberate. I believe that wholeheartedly because
with some people,
when you look at the transatlantic slave trade, for example, the Bible was absolutely used to enslave these Africans. And the best way to enslave them is to make them believe that God or Jesus looks like the slave master. Yeah. He looks like us.
Oh,
so
yeah.
if you worship him.
I wouldn't question that at all. Yeah, that part I wouldn't question.
Yeah, so I definitely think some of that was done deliberately. Yeah. And in doing that, the dominant culture, being European culture or white culture, began to impose a lot of that on other cultures. So, for example, when I just recently was reading this, when we look to Native American culture, a very small percentage of them converted to Christianity. And the reason why, it was looked at as a betrayal of their culture. Right. How dare you become the very thing or worship the God of the people who took our land and forced us on the reservations and annihilated our people. So it becomes a cultural issue even for Native Americans who look at Christianity that was brought to them by a dominant culture who brutally took their land. So we see this happening a lot. And so what I would say to my Christian brothers and sisters is this: we have to be careful imposing culture on people that we're trying to convert to Christianity. And I see this happening a lot. Go ahead.
We're not here to spread any culture. We're here to spread Christ.
Right.
But you know what happens a lot.
And Montise, we have to be careful because one of the things that we have fought all down through history from the garden to today is something called heresy. Now, we do have to be a little guarded about it because heresy creeps in, misrepresentations of the faith are then spread out amongst not only the believing community, but the unbelieving community. And we do have to be also careful that we don't ever run out of heresy.
Yeah, because then what would happen to us apologists if we ran out of heresy? That's our next sponsor. John is trying to segue. Montise was wondering, where are they going with this, right? So
yeah, you guys threw me off.
I know, we threw you off. Okay, well, yeah, our sponsor wants you to know the situation is dire. According to the latest research, at the present rate of consumption, our supply of heresies will be completely depleted by 2050. It'll be even worse than all those grocery store shelves missing all that toilet paper. It will be terrible. The consequences will be disastrous. If this happens, most cults will close their doors by the end of the century, and most heretical websites will completely disappear from the internet. You think you need hand sanitizer now, you're going to really be upset about the lack of heresies. Not to mention the fact that 75% of what passes as Christian programming will disappear from the airwaves and cable TV. Well, the solution is simple. Heresy recycling. Whether you're online, visiting a church, or out at the mall, you can do your part. Always look for the label, the HCB label, the Heresy Conservation Board, ensuring sustainable errors for the 21st century and beyond. Boy, what would we be doing if we didn't have heresies to combat?
Now, I want to interrupt your thought a second. So mark where you're at so you can pick up, because we have a question here that demonstrates the very problem we're trying to address, and that is a false presupposition that leads to a false question for which you have to unknot where they started before you can legitimately answer. Okay. The question is by Jay Dizel: if Jesus was a European,
okay,
why did the angels tell Mary and Joseph to go to take the baby Jesus into Egypt so he could blend with the other people? Who said Jesus was European? Whoever said that?
No, that's what I'm going to say. I saw him asking that earlier. No one ever said that. So I'm not sure where he's getting that from. Yeah. So to be clear, and that's Jake Dizzle. So let me be very clear to him and anyone else who's listening. No one here ever said Jesus was European. We never said that. He was Jewish. And before you try to say he was an Israelite and that you guys are all Israelites, that's another door. That this isn't the
go watch our Black Israelite film.
Go watch our other video about that.
And here's
right. But let me be clear. No one ever said that Jesus was white. In fact, the Bible never tells us his color. You can't use Revelation because Revelation is not a depiction of his color. We dealt with that in the last video we did when it talks about his hair being white like sheep wool, not texture, because it says white like sheep wool, white as snow. So it's describing the color of sheep wool snow. If you take that literally and say he had sheep hair, then you have to take it literally his hair was also snow. He had snow hair. So this is a depiction of color, not texture. But again, that we dealt with that in detail in our other video, which you can find on YouTube. But I did want to make this very clear, what I was saying before, where we have to be careful imposing culture when it comes to converting people to Christianity. I have seen it done time and time again, where they try to tell people a certain kind of music is proper and another kind is improper. That other music may be culturally, indigenous to that culture. So it's not fair to say another culture's music isn't right because it doesn't sound like your music. I've even heard this debate, interesting, weird debate here about Native Americans building quote unquote Christian totem poles. And I've heard it's, well, wait a minute, that's pagan. You can't do that. And that may be true. But if we're going to open those doors, we have to look at wreaths, Christmas trees. What are they? Those are all have pagan origins as well. So I'm just saying, when we started imposing our culture on other people, That's where this perception begins to
Yeah.
make it look like it is a white man's religion, and they're trying to impose a European culture on other cultures.
Now,
go ahead.
I'd like to add a little historical note to Jay Dizzle's question. He says that they went to Egypt so they could blend in with other people. No, it wasn't so they could blend in appearance. It just so happened that there was a huge, and I mean huge, Jewish community in Alexandria, Egypt. It was a place where a small Jewish family like Jesus, Mary, and Joseph could have gone, and they could have found work. Joseph could have found work as a carpenter to tide them over. They might have even had family connections in Alexandria or some of the neighboring towns. So it was to blend in with other Jews, is what it was, because there might have been at least as many Jews or more Jews in Alexandria at that time than there were in Jerusalem. So that's a little historical footnote. But go ahead, back to you.
No, awesome. No, that's awesome. And again, I don't want to let anyone dictate our discussion today as you try to take it to another place. But I just want to make sure that those listening understand the most important thing today. We see African roots in Christianity throughout the Bible. It was spreading through Northeast Africa. We see Aksum. We see Athanasius. We see the origins of Christianity in the Bible in the first century. There were Africans throughout the whole thing. There's no way a book that was written primarily on the continent of Africa could be a white man's religion. And Jesus was not European, so it could not have been a white man's religion. So with that being said, I want to be very clear. I think trying to focus on ethnicity, anytime we infuse ethnicity into religion, that to me is a problem right away. When we see it happening with the Moors, with the Hebrew Israelites, we see it happening with a Nation of Islam. Anytime you infuse ethnicity and race into religion, a red flag should go up.
Right.
Automatically, a red flag should go up. Christianity has nothing to do with ethnicity. And let me be fair to Islam. Islam has very little to do with ethnicity. That's why Nation of Islam is considered a cult to traditional Islam.
Right. By Islam and Christianity. Right.
Right.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So traditional Islam accepts all ethnicities. When we start seeing race injected into religion, whatever religion, a red flag should go up. There should be a red flag. So with that being said, I hope we're able to dispel some of these myths about Christianity being a white man's religion. It is not. It has never been.
Right.
Yeah, Malcolm X found that out about Islam. It was quite a shock to him to go to the where is it to go to Medina,
Mecca, right?
Or Mecca. I'm sorry, he went to Mecca.
Right.
Wrong town, and saw all these fair-skinned Muslims, and they're just side by side with Muslims of all different colors, and there was no problem. And so it gave him a whole new perspective that he wasn't getting. And this is what I would say to the Black Hebrew Israelites who are watching this. This is what I would say to the Nation of Islam people who are watching this. You live in a very narrow world. You live in you've got blinders on. You haven't even done what Malcolm X did, let alone with Bible-believing Christians do, which is read the scriptures. And we don't just read this. We expose ourselves to other views. Right. We listen to other people. So you haven't done that yet.
I go and hang out with Wiccans and Buddhists and Hindus and Baptists.
and Montise, you hang out with all these people, are you?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. You can't escape them.
No.
And so you have a comment like Jay says Christianity is not in the Bible. Well, that tells me he is largely biblically illiterate.
Right.
I'm not saying sections of it.
They were called Christians first at Antioch. That's in the book of Acts.
11. It's right there.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. And again, not trying to get into that today is not the purpose of today's discussion. But when we start looking at Hebrew Israelite theology, and I pointed this out to some of them recently, and they may get offended when you're saying this, but it is an aberrant religion. It is a cult.
Right.
And the characteristics of all cults is exactly what they do. Number one, they read themselves into scripture. Right. And that's what every cult does. This verse is about us. This verse is about me. They believe, like most cults do, that they have a monopoly on the Bible and the understanding of the Bible. And the only way for you to understand it is to join their particular cult. Jehovah's Witnesses, Mormons, Scientologists, Hebrew Israelites, they all say the same thing. They all believe their leaders had some special information, special knowledge that no other leader had. And the only way for you to obtain salvation or whatever it is they are espousing is through them. Yep. And if you're apart from them, you will be killed, destroyed, go to hell. This is every single cult does that. So Hebrew Israelites are no different from any other cult. Their understanding of the Bible is the only understanding of the Bible. Their interpretation, the only interpretation. So when I see the things that they're saying, and I don't want to be offensive, but it's no different from any other historical cult.
Right.
They have a short existence. They appeared early 1900s, like most cults have, and all of a sudden, their leaders have more knowledge, more information than hundreds of years of church fathers, historians, apologists, the monks, the biblical historians. Their leaders have more knowledge, more information than anyone who's ever existed in the history of the church. Based on what? And so, with all due respect to,
by the way, I want to interrupt you 1 second because I want to display something here for those. You had said cults read themselves into Scripture, and as it happens, we did an article on that a few weeks back, reading Scripture versus reading oneself into Scripture. You go to our website, midwestoutreach.org, type in reading Scripture and look for search, and it'll bring it right up, reading Scripture versus reading oneself into Scripture. That's a problem, and many groups do that.
Yep. No, absolutely. And again, that is one of the key characteristics of a cult. And again, Hebrew Israelites, Jehovah's Witnesses, Mormons, Scientology, they all do the same thing. If you remove the name, apply the theology, it's going to be the exact same thing. So I understand their passion, but their passion is misplaced, and they're trying to find identity and not knowing who they are. So this, I hate to characterize it this way, but when I look at what Hebrew Israelites have done, this is the greatest identity theft in the history of the world.
Well,
I like that identity theft. Yes.
One of them, there was a group that preceded it called British Israelism. That did that. It was a white ethnic group that did essentially the same thing. The Jews aren't really the Jews.
I know about
it's the British.
They doubled it. They stole from them and from the Jews at the same time. Right. That's funny.
Well, and again, I didn't want to distract too much. I just saw a lot of his comments, but I really. I'm just really hoping people got something from today's lesson regarding Christianity being a white man's religion. And again, as Christians, we know that Christ, the way to salvation is open to anyone who believes. Everyone who wants to know Christ can know Christ. Has nothing to do with race or ethnicity at all. We see the Bible talks about all ethnic groups, pos ethnos. All ethnic groups.
Every tongue, tribe, every group, every nation under heaven will be around the throne of the Lamb. Every skin
that's
color.
Revelation 7, Revelation 5. That's it.
Every skin color, every you name it. We'll all be there.
Yep. That's right.
I have heard said by an African American preacher that it is not a skin problem; it is a sin problem.
Amen. Yeah.
So, Montel, for those who want to correspond with you after Montise, did I say Montise?
You said Montel.
Oh, I was busy distracting myself somewhere else. Montise.
I kind of like Montel Williams.
Well, we're going to tell Montise. How do you like that, Montise? How can people contact you if they want to correspond to you? And they obviously they can comment on the video, and I'm sure they will. And you may take some time to respond or not. But if they want to contact you directly, can they do that, or do they need to email us and have us forward it?
No, they can either way. I mean, they can reach out to me by way of Facebook. Montise Peterson by way of Facebook. They can email me if they'd like. My email is actually the name of my book, Finding the Path to God at Gmail. Finding the Path to God at Gmail.
At Gmail.
So they can reach me
Okay.
there, or they can reach me on Facebook. They can message me on Facebook. That's fine.
Okay. And we appreciate all the interaction that we had in our chat areas today. That's good. And next week, we're going to do something different, which I'm not going to tell you now. It'll be a surprise even for Ron.
It usually
Well,
is anyways. I wake. Yeah.
Well, that's what I mean. It always is. It always is. 5 minutes before we go, and he goes, "What are we doing today?"
What's today's topic?
Ron, you want to walk us out of here?
Why not? Okay, well, our resident cult leader profiler is Kneel Before Me. Our wardrobe manager is See How It Fits You. Our culinary services are provided by Chef Ham and Cheese. Our tinfoil hat provisioner is Just In Case. Our Jehovah's Witnesses coverage comes from Armageddon and D Opposer. Our Mormon archives manager is Polly Gummas. Our liberal denominations bureau chief is Lucy Goosey. Our transgender issues coverage comes from Ben-Hur. Our special correspondent for cults based on the Hindenburg disaster and flying turkeys, Ode to Humanity. Our fact-checking supervisor is Yoleg Pulling. Our technical assistance comes through Murky Research. Our legal advisors are at the law firm of Dewey, Cheatham, and Howe. Our grievance resolutions director is Giovanna Pisami. Our director of privacy assurance is Wiretapping. Our original idea sourcing comes from Drew A. Blank. The Unknown Webcast is a production of Midwest Christian Outreach, Inc. in cooperation with Emergency Manicure Productions, both of whom are totally responsible for this content. And you know what? We need somebody to provide Black Hebrew Israelite coverage. I'll have to ask Montise who a good person for that would be. But, of course, you'll never be able to prove any of this in a court of law. Never going to happen. No. So, yeah, we don't have anybody on the Black Hebrew Israelite beat right now. So we'll have to get somebody. I'll have to look them up.
Okay. Look them up.
Yeah.
All right. Montise, if you can hold on, we're going to end this for the public, and then we can talk about them afterwards. So,
wow.
All right, hold on, Ron. Everyone else, it's been good being with y'all, and we will see you next week.